Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another Dojo Live. Today is Tuesday, February 15th, 2022. This is Tulio Siragusa broadcasting from Southern California. Joining me today is Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, Mexico, and our guest, who's also here in Southern California, just a little bit north of me, John Geary, who's the CEO and co-founder of Abodu. Hi, John. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Great to be here.
Kim, so you'll know before you joined us, John and I were talking. We're practically neighbors before I moved a little south. We lived around the corner from each other, probably frequenting the same Whole Foods and Starbucks.
Oh, yeah.
Literally
Okay.
like walking.
Maybe you
small
bought
world.
each other one of those, what do you call it, pay it forwards or something.
You never know. We might
Leave
have
a
seen
penny,
each other
take
in the
a
street
penny.
and high-five each other. You never know. Because you don't recognize anybody with masks in the past few years anyway.
No,
So anyway,
no.
John, it's good to have you with us. Before we get into our topic today, we're talking about ADUs. Many are like wondering, what the heck are ADUs? But before we go into the topic and introduce the topic, let's get to know you a little bit and your company. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, John, we'd appreciate it. And again, welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Let's start. My name is John Geary. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Abodu. We build prefabricated ADUs in California and the Pacific Northwest. A little bit of my background: born and raised in Northern California in a home building family. Housing is very deep in my blood and a lot of kind of my personal identity working around the housing space since I was very young. My dinner table conversation growing up with my parents was about housing developments and different cities that my dad's company was working in to develop more housing and the challenges around adding housing in California. And you can imagine by being indoctrinated with that from a very young age, summer jobs in high school, on my dad's construction sites, going to city council meetings with him whenever they were discussing projects he was working on. Pretty like understandable how I ended up in the housing field here a couple decades later. Fast forward a couple of years, started my career working as a management consultant at Bain & Company, global management consulting firm where you get the opportunity to work with Fortune 500 CEOs and executive teams across the world, tackling their most challenging problems. And after quite a few years doing that, realized that my passion lied in housing and was very excited to make the switch back to California and back into housing a couple of years ago now. So started Abodu almost 4 years ago now, 3.5 years ago with my business partner, Eric McInerney, who we actually met as interns in college. Fast forward that almost 10 years, and here we are deep as business partners running a fast growing business here in California, but entirely focused on housing, right? So I would say I'm very much so a housing nerd, love talking about all the ins, outs, ups, downs that come with it and all the challenges, both politically, environmentally, socially, that come with housing, because it's not a one-sided issue. But it's something I've been very passionate about and excited to kind of dive in a little bit more on a very specific niche of housing today called ADUs, which is what we build at Abodu.
Well, we're looking forward to learning all we can. Tell us about Abodu. What gave birth to this idea? What do you guys do?
So Abodu, at its core, we build detached accessory dwelling units for homeowners across the Western U.S. So
There
the first
it
question,
is, accessory dwelling unit.
There you go.
Is that another word for a shed?
Really good question. Think a shed-sized house, a really big shed.
Got it. Like a right.
Right, like very nice construction, right? If you were to take like a brand new, think like a condo building, right? Something that's 500 square feet, 600 square feet, one bed, one bath, two bed, one bath, except it's not in a building. It's an entirely detached structure, but everything you'd expect in a home: a full kitchen, a full bathroom, full-size bedrooms, a living area, the things you'd expect out of a normal home, just on a smaller footprint and in backyards across the Western U.S., right? So a very novel concept.
Come to think of it, my wife recently showed me an ADU and she was like, this would be great. You can set up your office in the backyard. I'm like, are you trying to tell me something? Get out of the house.
No, I think that's exactly right. The use cases are endless, right? People, at its core, it empowers homeowners to add living space to their property. And we saw that with Abodu and said, how can we help make this process easier for homeowners, expand the access to housing across the Western U.S., and just make a little dent in the housing shortage?
So I got a million questions. Let's just go right into it and see what we can learn, because there's a lot of use cases, I would assume.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there's commercial use cases for this as well. But let's just,
Oh yeah.
just go right into it. Kim, if you could please kick it off with the topic, see what we can learn.
I have to say, John, I find it interesting that you started out with your co-founder, working basically for free for someone else, and now you're basically working for free for yourselves, right? It's usually the
Pretty much
founders who have to.
Pretty much how it goes.
Yeah. So cool. The topic is chosen by you today is ADUs, accessory dwelling units. I think I got that right. An innovative, flexible, and practical housing alternative. So what we really want to do is explore some of the use cases, benefits, and value that ADUs can bring to the modern home owner. So I know use cases, benefits, value, it's pretty clear. But what is your definition of the modern homeowner? Who's that?
It's a really great question, right? And it's something that we think about daily at Abodu. Who is the modern homeowner? Who is the kind of profile of folks that own homes across the United States? It's shifted quite a bit, right? I think, if you look back 20, 30 years, it was largely the nuclear family was the homeowner back then, right? It was 2 to 3 children, spouses, they raised their family out of their home, and then the children would move on to the next thing, right? I think the modern homeowner has actually shifted quite a bit because of the rising cost of housing, not only in the United States, but actually globally. We've seen trends come to the United States housing stock that have been prominent globally for centuries, primarily around multi-generational households, right? So now you have grandparents or aunts and uncles, as well as children back at home, as well as grandchildren back at home, right? And so you have these multiple generations living in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 3-bedroom, 1-bath type housing profile, which is very unique. And it's only been exacerbated during COVID, where people have moved back home, right? And I think what's really fascinating there is how does that use of the home change as the people that are dwelling in it change, right? One of the things that ADUs really help on that multi-generational household front is this is new dedicated living space, right? This is another 500, 600 square feet of living space in the backyard that's a separate home. It lives separate. It has its own kitchen, its own bathroom, its own entire living space to really allow multi-generational households to take full advantage of their property, all the benefits of pooling cost, pooling the ability to live in that space, but still give that kind of very high integrity dedicated living experience. And so the modern home is always shifting, and our job at Abodu is to continue watching those trends and making sure that we're serving that modern homeowner as it continues to shift.
So I'm curious about these ADUs, right? I mean, I was joking about, is it like a shed? But there's a point of that question, right? You put a shed in the backyard. You don't necessarily have to get construction permits, depending on the size. It just sits there. You don't even have to pay taxes on it. There's a lot of values to having a shed, but the uses are not for people living in it, right? It's for your stuff or your landscaping.
Not legally, anyway.
Not legally.
Correct.
Anyway, so I'm just curious. These could be pretty sizable dwellings with bedrooms, living room, plumbing. How does that work with permits and things of that sort?
Great question, right? And I think, you talk about sheds. Sheds are 4 thin walls that go up with a roof over them and don't have electric running to them typically, don't have plumbing running to them typically, are not on a foundation, right? Not fit for living. ADUs are different because I'd say the only similarity they have with sheds are they're a structure often found in the backyard. But it's a full up to code housing unit, right? So a couple of the really big benefits of that. All ADUs that Abodu installs are fully permitted, and we manage that entire permitting process for homeowners from start to finish. That can be pretty daunting, right? Working with your local jurisdiction and saying, hey, I would love to, as simple as I would love to change my windows out. That can be a daunting process for homeowners without changing anything structural in their home, let alone I'd love to build a new home from scratch in my backyard. And so part of what we've done at Abodu is really attack that process for homeowners and work directly with cities across California and the state of Washington, our kind of 2 markets right now, to make that process easier, transparent, and own that for homeowners from start to finish. So now we're talking a fully permitted new dwelling unit in their backyard. What is the value of that compared to a shed for a homeowner? Let's say you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that's 2,000 square feet, and you add one of our 2-bedroom, 1-bath Abodu 2s in your backyard. That's an additional 610 square feet of permitted living space, 2 bedrooms, an additional bathroom that goes on your property bedroom bath count. So now your 3-bed, 2-bath, 2,000 square foot home is now a 5-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,600 square foot home, right? So that's livable square footage that is permitted and you can sell as part of your property, right? So your property value increase has actually gone up significantly by running this through the proper permitting system, having to be built up to code, up to date energy standards and all things that come with generally new construction in the United States.
So does that become a mother-daughter situation, like a rentable unit as well? How does that, because it's a one-family dwelling. Do you now have a two-family dwelling? Yeah, I'm trying to enter benefits. Click.
That's exactly right. So why does Abodu exist, right? Abodu was started in response to a slate of legislation that the state of California passed a couple years back that legalized ADU statewide. So if you are a single family property owner in the state of California, you have the legal right to build one of these in your backyard, which is a fascinating paradigm, right? You've now empowered millions of homeowners across the state to recognize this increased property value. It could be for a multi-generational household, right? Kids coming back from school, elderly parents wanting to age in place, you name it. But it also can be for, as you alluded to earlier, commercial use, rental income, right? Over 50% of our Abodu homeowners end up renting out their units at some point over the ownership of their Abodu, right? Hey, we have family coming for the holidays, but we'd love to rent this out to a traveling nurse or a teacher that's in town for the school year. We'll go ahead and place this at market rent for our area, and we'll have a long-term recurring revenue stream out of our backyard, right? So it's providing homeowners the ability to create value out of their underutilized assets in their backyard. But more so just giving them the flexibility, right? Once you have this 1-bedroom, 1-bath or 2-bedroom, 1-bath unit in your backyard, the use cases of this can shift from year 1 to year 10 to year 20.
Amazing.
I'm really curious. I understand the use cases. For me, what's coming to mind, with a very expensive housing market, a lot of people, students coming out of university with really heavy loan debt and all these other problems, I can see how this benefits and where this helps. However, I can't help but ask the question of how accessibility. It seems like you have to have money to be able to do this. So if this catch-22, like I have to have money in order to get an ADU, but I need an ADU because I don't have money. So how do we break that cycle? Like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like how does that work? How truly accessible is something like this for the standard average person?
So it's a really good point, right? And something that we think about consistently at Abodu. How do we make sure as many homeowners as possible can take advantage of putting a beautiful Abodu in their backyard? One of the benefits of building an Abodu is that's a permitted structure that then adds property value to your property, right? So let's say there's a couple of these ways. Let's say you have a lot of equity in your home. You can pull out a home equity line of credit or a cash out refinance against that equity to fund the construction of your Abodu or any ADU in general. But a second option is actually a construction loan, because you're taking the value of your property before, you're funding the construction of the unit, and then your property has an increased value after that construction is complete that then you can refinance into another full mortgage, right? So we've seen people, that have their entire home paid off in cash that just pull a little bit of equity out of that to build a unit. And we've seen people that have absolutely no equity in their home, but are able to fund this with a construction loan to get this project done. But it's a very, very important piece. How do you go ahead and fund this? One of the cool things is when you look at, what's the monthly payment associated with a line of credit to build one of our units? It hovers, depending on interest rates, around like $1,000 a month, right? And if you look at the markets we serve, Los Angeles County, Orange County, San Diego County, the entire Bay Area, King County up in Washington, Seattle, market rents for those areas are astronomically high in a terrible way, right? There's got to be ways to pull that down. But if you look at a San Jose homeowner right now, adding an Abodu, their debt payment will be about $1,000 a month, and their rental payment will be $2,700 a month plus, right? So there's actually an immediate built-in cash flow once they put that unit on the market, if they're really solving for cash flow out of their backyard.
Brilliant. So how does technology come into play with your company? I heard that you facilitate the whole process for the homeowner, the registry, the permits, all those things, right?
Yep.
I'm just curious how the technology come to play. Is it like an e-commerce? I go in there and I choose one and I order it. Is it that simple? How does it work?
So we think about technology within our business across a couple different sectors, right? First is just the physical act of executing on the product that people are buying, right? So we build all of our units off-site in a manufacturing facility that uses extremely modern techniques of batch processes for construction, so that we're not building one-offs in backyards, not being able to see any benefits of scale, right? So that unit is fully complete in factory when it arrives on the back of a truck into someone's front yard. We take care of that foundation, utility connections, all the stuff required in the backyard to actually receive the unit. And then we use a crane to pick that unit up off the truck, boom it over the home, place on the foundation, right? So like in the truest form of technology, we're talking older school technology here, but still leveraging it in new ways to deliver cost efficiencies and time efficiencies for homeowners across the board, right? But then taking a different look at that, right? So let's call that old technology. Let's talk new technology, right? We're continually developing our own software around project management here, right? How can you make this process easier, more traceable, more efficient, for homeowners that we're working with and vendors we're working with, right? So we've built our own internal platform that connects our factory partners, our GC site teams that are doing a lot of the install work, our homeowners and Abodu all in one. So instead of having these disparate communications and disparate data flows across the board, trying to make sure that someone didn't miss a phone call, we've actually built that into a streamless experience that allows a couple things. One is lower cost, lower time, and a much better customer experience, which frankly, go ask any friend that's done a renovation in the past 3-4 years. Go ask any friend that's built a house in the last 3 to 5 years. It's a terrible experience in the industry right now. And we're really trying to move the needle on making that enjoyable.
I'm curious as to what other types of technologies you've had to link to or what you utilize in your own software. One of the things that's coming to my mind right now is something like Google Maps. Like if you're taking a built construction from point A to point B, I imagine there's a lot of physical roadblocks that could potentially get in your way. This bridge is too narrow. The street is whatever. Yeah. There's these trees. So how are you able to solve for like the physical constraints using tech?
Great question, right? So we've built it all starts with kind of design thinking, right? From every single product that we build, we've done the upfront thinking on what is the lot sizes within California and Washington that can receive one of these units, right? How about the areas based on the access roads to those areas? How about things like overhead power lines that may be causing challenges to access? We've built a massive data set around this that allows for any lead that comes in through our website immediately gets funneled through this data set and gives us an output that says, yes, this person can receive an Abodu or no, right? So something that would take multiple human hours over the course of a day to process, let's say 100 leads, now takes us less than 1 hour to process those 100 leads because we've been able to run that through our data sets that tell us that feasibility, right? So a lot of it is technology making the customer experience better, but technology enabling scale on our side, right? If you look at a business like ours, 100 active projects right now, that's really tough to manage and kind of grapple your arms around all those projects in multiple geographies, multiple partners. We're doing that with a headcount of less than 50 people right now, right? Because we've been able to insert software and technology every piece of our process to allow us to pull that lever to scale, right? And you play that forward, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and you say, hey, as you scale, how can you do that without having to throw a whole bunch of human labor hours out that, but rather can you leverage software and scalable technology to continue winning? So
it's very interesting. As I'm listening, I can see the absolute value for the homeowner to have this kind of dwelling in their backyard for a number of reasons. I could totally see value of creating an office or a guest home or whatever, right? Or rental unit. Mm-hmm. And then we talked a little bit about how the modern homeowner is changing. There are people who are traditionally roommates who are now co-owning homes. So they're so the home ownership is a shared experience amongst a number of people sometimes today. Wondering if some people would buy like a tear me down and build a bunch of ADUs on their properties and create almost like a cooperative of homeowners in the same properties. Are you seeing any of that happening? Where's that going on? Is that a trend that you think that might continue? Again, I don't know if it's happening, but I'm thinking to myself, that could be a cool way for a lot of the young folks who are renting and want to pool their resources. And instead of living in one dwelling, everybody gets their own dwelling on the same property somehow. What's the thought process there?
Julio, it's an innovative way to think, right? How do we take these single family communities that are traditionally very challenging to gain access to, right? A huge dollar value barrier to entry. And how do we say, well, can we take that property and make more homes on it and make that more accessible to everyone involved? There's actually a really fascinating state law that just changed in California this past year called SB 9. Essentially, what that does is it takes the concept of the ADU laws California passed a couple of years back, that says every single family homeowner has the right to build an ADU, and it takes that and says, actually, every single family homeowner has the right to build duplexes on their property and sell those separately, right? Which is a monumental shift in how California has thought about its housing stock, right? Now, if you have that home right down the street in LA, and you can actually turn that into 4 homes and sell those either separate or have co-tenants, however you please, right? But it's a fascinating shift in the ability legally for folks to be able to do that. Now, outside of that legislative shift, Tulio, it's actually quite tough to say, let's go get a piece of property and build 6 Abodus on it, because that property actually has to look like a multifamily property instead of a single family property. Or it has to have a hospitality or commercial use case associated with it, right? So I think one of the really challenging things we see is people really get excited about the ability to use our wonderfully designed, smaller homes and a lot of different use cases, but still we are constrained by the underpinning of land use requirements for a given parcel.
That would be a pretty interesting change. Wouldn't you guys agree? I mean, it seems as though, at least in the past, ever since the brokerage meltdown that happened 12 years ago, right?
Yep.
The construction of new homes has been basically non-existent, yet population has grown exponentially. So there's a huge supply issue and bigger demand. And their generational wealth has also increased, where younger folks have more money that could actually purchase home, but there's no homes to purchase. It would seem that changing these laws around where you could potentially create multiple dwellings, in essence, the square footage wouldn't change, right? You could still have a 2,500 square foot home. It's just going to be 4 different dwellings in one property. What's the hope of sort of moving in that direction? Because that seems to be something that at least the newer generations would prefer, and makes home ownership more accessible, I would think. It's becoming harder and harder for people to find a home because there's just not enough inventory.
But it's interesting, the societal trend that you just mentioned with younger homeowners, right? I think the shift is more toward minimalism, experience over possession, even if I want to be a parent or not. So how large of a home do I really need? As long as it's pet friendly, right? So I think just the shift in what the next generation of home buyer even looks like could fit into something.
No, it's spot on, right? It's why states like California are rethinking their land use policy. How do we grow into a state that is still competitive and attracts the top talent in the world and the top universities and institutions in the world if we don't have housing and dwelling units that people want to live in and that they can afford to live in, right? And I think what's really interesting is the concept of kind of that SB 9 piece that we talked about. Is it's basically taking these big plots of land, right? 1/4 acre plots of land, 1/8 acre plots of land that can support 15 families, but are only having 1 family at the moment because of how single family zoning was rolled out in these areas, and saying, well, can we think about that a little bit differently? Obviously, there's no right answer here, right? There's people that say, hey, I bought this single family home because I want to live in this kind of community. And they did that 30, 40 years. And obviously, the amazing job growth has come into their community and suddenly their home values have skyrocketed. But also it takes, the younger generation that says, well, shoot, I don't want to commute 2 hours for work. So where can I work? How can I afford to live? And it creates these really challenging paradigms where we're actually seeing this gap between allowing top talent to connect with top jobs because of cost of living between those two. And I think it's one of those things that's going to continue to evolve, right? There's no silver bullet there. But that's something we think about quite frequently.
So we do know that there's evolution. We do know that there seems to be this increased space for an ADU or other tiny house sort of concepts. The software that you and Abodu have come up with, are you looking to not just sell ADUs, but to sell software as well for other people who are jumping on the train?
Kim, good question. At current, no. Right, we're laser focused on delivering what we do and doing it very well and doing it for as many homeowners as possible. But actually, what's been a really fascinating journey for us on the software front is we've built this software out of need, right? Hey, is there something off the shelf that we can use for a project management tool to engage with our vendors and our homeowners and just, focus on what we do. And, over the past 3.5 years, we've realized, shoot, maybe we've got a little unique business, or maybe some of the off-the-shelf options just aren't doing what we need them to do. And so we've actually said it's worth our time and worth our capital investment to develop this software, because it will certainly make us more efficient. And maybe sometime in the future, it makes other teams more efficient. But right now, we're still dialing that in to make that the best product it can be, making our team more efficient and giving us that competitive edge as this industry continues to grow over the next 5 to 10 years, and saying, hey, we're the team that can get this done fastest at the best value for the most people across our service areas.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Makes
That's
sense.
part of your IP. I wouldn't license that. That could also be a good leverage for a big construction company to acquire you guys by having that piece of IP. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
All right. So we've learned a lot so far, and we're curious to learn a little bit more about Abodu itself. First of all, I'm curious, did the name come from Abodu?
It did. If you look at our name,
Abode, ADU.
The word ADU is in Abodu. And it just kind of came together naturally. It was the very first name we came up with, right?
Yes.
I have to say, I've been living. It took me several years of living in Mexico to realize it was queso, cheese, tortilla, quesadilla. But I got the Abode ADU right away.
Oh, I love that kid.
Well, I'm a little slower. I'm older. I'm a little slower. So let's talk about the culture of the company a little bit. Like, what kind of people want to be part of this? What do you typically look for? What's a day in the life at Abodu?
Oh, there's no 2 days being the same at Abodu. I think, one of the big underpinnings of our culture are people that are really fascinated by housing and the challenge it presents, right? All the stuff we've talked about, why there's so many different ways to look at housing. But at its core, people are passionate about trying to make that better. And I think we've attracted a really, really strong team that is fascinated by housing, thinks that the way it's being done today could be better, and wants to be part of a team that's really pushing the boundaries on housing, both in how we work with vendors, how we think about material procurement, how we think about treating customers, right? We treat customers the way that a software company treats customers. It's lifetime value. It's not just a one and done, wreak as much value as possible to your customers. It's how can we create the best possible experience for our homeowners so that they tell their friends, their neighbors, their family ones, their loved ones, they buy their next home in 10 years and they want that Abodu in the backyard because it was such an unbelievable life experience to have this product in their backyard. And so we've attracted a team that's excited about that. How can we think differently about housing, and how can we move really fast, right? So, Abodu has had we're 3.5 years old. We didn't hire our first employee until the first 2 years into the business. Eric and I used all of our own funding for the first 2 years of the business to get this running.
Told you were working together for free.
Yes, we were. Right. But that's created this culture of, how do we not spend through excess? How do we not just throw money at a problem, but how do we actually engineer that problem to a solution? And our team has grown really rapidly as a result, right? We were 12 people when we started 2021, and here we are just underneath 50 going into 2022. But I think at its core, we've attracted folks that want to move the needle on housing and are excited by a team that is putting hundreds of units of housing in the ground every year right now, which is a pretty substantial impact.
It's pretty amazing what you guys are doing. It might even save some marriages. Could you imagine a multi-dwelling property? It's like I like neoclassic minimalist, and your wife might like country bumpkin, and you have your own setup. And you have one home where you all meet to play and eat, and then the other one, everybody goes to their own homes at the end of the day. Instead of the east and west wing, it's you go to the south dwelling, I go to the north dwelling. You go to your Abodu and be nice.
More homeowners than you would imagine that say, hey, this has been fantastic. We have our own space during COVID. Like, we were really on top of each other, and we just needed our own TV shows.
Well, congratulations. It sounds as though California is probably the more progressive state when it comes to this. We're up on time, but I have to ask this other question. Is there hope for other states that are going to implement similar policies? I mean, this is going to continue to be an issue, finding housing.
Absolutely.
So it seems like a straightforward way to solve that problem. Put more smaller dwellings in the same property.
So Oregon legalized ADU statewide, similarly to California a few years back. Outside of Oregon and California, though, there are countless states having those conversations as we speak. So the state of Connecticut legalized ADUs last year. The state of New York is considering ADU legalization this year, right? Cities like Denver, like Austin, Dallas, Houston, right? Big metropolitan areas that are saying, hey, maybe our housing prices aren't as bad as California, but we're seeing the trend and it's not good. It's not good for our communities. We need to find ways to get ahead of this. And I think in 5 years, we are at a point where we look back and say, wow, of course ADUs make sense. Why didn't we do this sooner?
Right.
And so it's a really fun time to be in the industry, where we were one of the first players in California when the first legalization came about, and have really got to define this market. What happens over the next 5 years as new markets come online as other states legalize? So.
Didn't Elon Musk move into an ADU in his factory? I think he did. I read something where that he moved.
There was a
ADU.
bunch of reports that he did, but then he actually came out and said he didn't, and it was a fun kind of media buzz around it. But he does live in a small home, I believe.
It's all good. Well, it's been great to have you with us, John. We've learned a lot, and we wish you a lot of success. Just stay with us as we go off the air in just a second. Kim, what do we got coming up for the rest of the week? We have 2 more shows, right? Tomorrow and Thursday?
Sorry, yes, I was a bit confused. I believe that tomorrow we actually do not have a show. The show that was supposed to be today,
no, we do. Let's
this morning
see.
got moved to Thursday, did it not?
That
Thursday
moved
morning?
to Thursday morning. Yes.
Yeah.
So we had a show at 10 a.m. this morning. That got moved to Thursday. So we have 3 more shows, actually. We have...
No, Wednesday show was postponed.
Oh, that was postponed
we've got
too.
2 shows on Thursday, I think. Yeah, I'm a little confused. Yeah, I think
you're right. We have 2 more shows.
Got moved to Thursday,
February 17th.
Yes,
we got one at 10 a.m. and one at 12 p.m. The one at 10 a.m. is with Tom Levine, who's with Verbit. And we're going to talk about transcription, a $30 billion industry thanks to AI. And the one at 12 p.m. on Thursday is with Yadu Gopalan, who's the co-founder and CEO of Esper, talking about DevOps and dedicated device management. So come back. You got a day off tomorrow. Come back on Thursday.
It's been
at 10
a strange week, but very good.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
See you
Thank you,
again
John,
soon.
for joining us today.